My name is John Moses. I'm a member of the Delaware and Upper Mohawk bands from the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory near Brantford, Ontario. And my father was in attendance at the Mohawk Institute at the Mushhole. He went in when he was, I believe, 9 years old, and he left in 1947, by which point he would have been 14 or 15. Apparently, the residential school principals and administrators throughout the decades of the 1950s and 60s and beyond, they used to have annual conventions and conferences. They would get together to talk about best practices and lessons learned and what might happen next with the system of administration of residential schools in Canada. So in anticipation of that, he was approached to provide his own impressions of his residential school experience. And at that point, in 1965, he wrote a 5-page memoir documenting his experiences at the Mushhole, which, as I say, he had attended under exceptionally severe wartime and post-war conditions. By nature, he was the kind of fellow that if you asked him what was on his mind, he would let you know, kind of thing. It's quite a graphic document. As I say, he spoke mainly of the poor diet, the poor clothing, and the overwork that the children were subjected to. And, I recall him relating to me that a couple of people said, well, everybody in Canada, everybody, many people were having a rotten time during the Second World War, so that was your experience. And but it's 1966 now. Next year is the celebration of the centennial year. So let's keep focused on the future. Let's keep focused on that. It was essentially dismissed as of being of historical interest. But certainly there was so much happening within the Indigenous rights movement, both in Canada and the United States during the decade of the 1960s. It was the rise of what's become known as the Red Power movement. And in response to a lot of the Indigenous political agitation of that era, there came a new focus on Indian control of Indian education. And it's at that point, by the late 60s and early 70s, for the first time ever, you start to see residential schools in various areas of the country actually being shut down and closed. So my father writes his memoir in 1965. It's circulated, throughout the department, presumably through 66 and beyond. By 1970, with the rise of the Indian control of Indian education movement, the Mohawk Institute becomes one of the residential schools that's actually slated for closure. When my dad passed away in 2013, we came across the document again. We decided at that point that we would essentially read it into the record of the research that was being accumulated for the Indian Residential Schools Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Between myself and my brother and my mother, we actually had an opportunity to present an actual copy of it in person to Justice, or Senator now, Murray Sinclair. My father never hid his residential school experience, neither did he dwell upon it. I think if he were here today, he would be quite forthright in saying, as he said in the memoir itself, this is not my story, but yours. The responsibility for these conditions that are described in my memoir lie with the Indian Affairs branch, with the churches, and with the people of Canada. It's for the student population and for the Canadian population itself to reconcile itself with this aspect of its own history. Likewise, on the Indigenous side of the equation, there's some reckoning that needs to be done as well.